From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We're building out GM, building out AIG, building out Citigroup, bail out our students, educate our children now.
Reduce the rate. Amidst massive government bailouts of the nation's banks, the Reverend Jesse Jackson's launching a new campaign urging the Obama administration to slash the interest rates on student loans. We'll also speak with Alan Collins, author of The Student Loan Scam, the most oppressive debt in U.S. history and how we can fight back. Then author Michael Parenti on capitalism's self-inflicted apocalypse. That's the title of his latest article on the global economic meltdown. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. The Iraqi journalist who threw his shoes at President Bush has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. A reporter for al-Baghdadiyya television, Muntazar al-Zaidi, drew worldwide attention when he hurled his shoes at Bush during a news conference in December. Zaidi was convicted of assaulting a foreign leader. His attorney and family have claimed prison guards have abused Zaidi since his jailing. Earlier today, Zaidi's brother Uday Zaidi rejected the verdict.
We have already appealed the verdict, but this verdict was taken before session. Iraqi justice is not independent and it is not honest, and I scorn those who say Iraqi justice is independent because it is not. It is politicized. This court was set up according to Paul Bremer's decision, and the verdict of this court was issued by Bush decisions.
In other Iraq news, 2 top officials under the Saddam Hussein regime have been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Former Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz and Presidential Advisor Ali Hassan al-Majid were convicted of a crime against humanity for their alleged roles in the 1992 killings of 42 merchants. Fluent in English, Tariq Aziz was known as the international face of Hussein's government prior to the U.S. invasion. He's widely believed to have wielded little influence in Hussein's government. The death toll from Tuesday's suicide bombing west of Baghdad has risen to 33 people. The dead included 2 Iraqi journalists with the Cairo-based Baghdadiyya TV. Another television reporter was also critically injured. In Pakistan, hundreds of activists have been jailed ahead of today's massive protest march by opponents of President Asif Ali Zardari. The Pakistani government has also banned public gatherings in 2 key provinces. The march was initially organized to demand the reinstatement of the deposed Supreme Court Chief Justice Iftikhar Mohammed Chowdhury. In Israel and the occupied territories, the Obama administration's announced it'll withdraw its entire $900 million aid pledge if the pending Palestinian Unity government doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. The warning was reportedly delivered by Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas last week. Clinton told Abbas the U.S. Congress won't approve Palestinian aid unless the Palestinian government also renounces violence. No such conditions have been imposed on Israel. The Israeli government refuses to renounce violence and has never recognized the right of Palestine to exist. Palestinians have also criticized the demand they recognize Israel's right to exist because it forces them to go beyond recognizing Israel within secure borders, but in fact affirm the legitimacy of their dispossession and ongoing occupation. The Obama administration says the last Congress for a $100 billion commitment to the International Monetary Fund to aid struggling nations hit by economic crisis. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner said poorer countries need assistance for the downturn to reverse.
It's time now for us to move together and to begin to act to put in place a stronger framework of reforms. A lot of good work's happened, but we need to now bring this together so that we're together as a world economy working together. Everything we do in the United States will be more effective if we have the world moving with us.
It's unclear what kind of conditions recipient nations would face for accepting the new IMF aid. President Obama said Geithner will push for greater international commitments at an upcoming summit of G20 finance ministers.
We've got 2 goals in the G20. The first is to make sure that there is concerted action around the globe to jumpstart the economy. The second goal is to make sure that we are moving forward on a regulatory reform agenda that ensures that we don't see these same kinds of systemic risks and the potential for this kind of crisis again in the future.
The The investigative journalist Seymour Hersh has revealed the Bush administration ran an executive assassination ring that reported directly to former Vice President Dick Cheney. Hersh says U.S. operatives have secretly gone into countries and executed suspects on a target list. The operation was apparently run under the extra-legal Joint Special Operations Command, overseen only by the White House. Hersh made the disclosure while speaking Tuesday at the University of Minnesota. Italy's top court has dealt prosecutors a major setback in the trial over the CIA kidnapping of the Egyptian cleric Abu Omar. 26 Americans are being tried in absentia, along with several former Italian intelligence officials. On Wednesday, Italy's constitutional court threw out most of the evidence in the case on the grounds prosecutors have violated so-called state secrecy. Omar was seized on the streets of Milan in 2003 and taken to U.S. bases in Italy and Germany before being sent to Egypt. He says he was tortured there during a 4-year imprisonment. President Obama has signed into law the $410 billion omnibus spending bill funding the federal government for much of this year. The bill includes a measure that'll force companies to provide more information on chemicals they release into the environment. The provision reverses a 2006 Bush administration regulation that eased requirements on reporting chemicals. With his signature on the spending bill also came Obama's first signing statement, a presidential declaration freeing him from following some of the bill's contents. Obama took issue with 5 provisions, including one relating to negotiations with foreign governments and international organizations. Newly released figures show the number of homes threatened by foreclosures rose 30% in February over the same period last year. According to Realty Track, nearly 291,000 homes received at least one foreclosure-related notice last month, up 6% from January. A federal judge has paved the way to throwing out charges against the Palestinian professor Sami Al-Arian. In a new ruling, Judge Leonie Brinkema says Al-Arian may have been duped into thinking his plea bargain protected him from future prosecutions. Brinkema has given Professor Al-Arian's lawyers 10 days to ask for the case's dismissal. Al-Arian was released in September after over 5 years of prison, but still faces charges for refusing to testify before a grand jury about a cluster of Muslim organizations in Northern Virginia. He was initially accused of being involved in the group Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but a Florida jury failed to return a single guilty verdict on any of the 17 charges against him. Still, Dr. Al-Arian chose jail time rather than undergo a second trial after prosecutors refiled charges. Al-Arian's defense lawyers argue prosecutors have violated his plea deal by subsequently charging him for refusing to testify in cases that have nothing to do with him. In Washington, D.C., a small group of demonstrators rallied for single-payer health care outside the national meeting of the American Health Insurance Plans on Wednesday. A handful of protesters burned their health insurance bills as an act of protest. The rally was called by a new group, SinglePayerAction.org, that's advocating direct action to demand a single-payer health insurance system in the United States. Many U.S. colleges go on spring break tomorrow. One group of students will be using their time off to rally against what they call, quote, illegal occupations and the use of torture by the United States government. The group, Our Spring Break, says they'll join a march organized by Witness Against Torture. The group's website is ourspringbreak.org. The Obama administration's nominated Seattle Police Chief Gil Kierlikowski to be the nation's new drug czar. The White House announced the pick as it also unveiled a new plan to emphasize treatment over jailing in drug-related cases. Under the policy, the Obama administration will order greater use of alternative drug courts that allow offenders to seek treatment rather than serve jail time. Kierlikowski said efforts should focus on reducing demand.
The success of our efforts to reduce the flow of drugs is largely dependent on our ability to reduce demand for them, and that starts with our youth. Our nation's drug problem is one of human suffering, and as a police officer, but also in my own family, I have experienced the effects that drugs can have on our youth, our families, and our communities.
Kierlikowski says his stepson has struggled with addiction. Appearing with Kierlikowski, Vice President Joe Biden said the U.S. will also focus on the drug wars in Mexico.
Beginning of last year, there have been nearly 7,000 drug-related murders in Mexico. If we had said that years ago, we would have looked at each other like we were crazy. But 7,000 drug-related murders in Mexico. Violent drug trafficking organizations are threatening both the United States and Mexican communities.